It's 1 minute before 10 o'clock. Let's go to hour 2 of our show. And we are going to go, I believe he's in the Washington, D.C. area. We'll find out. Is Lyndon LaRouche. He's a well-known defender of justice and civil rights, internationally known economist, author, and statesman. Mr. LaRouche has written about 12, 13 books. Who's counting anymore? It's LaRouchePack.com. Lyndon LaRouche, it's an honor to have you on the show once again. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
How are things? And are you in the Washington, D.C. area?
Well, it's quite a distance from out in the sticks in Virginia.
I saw on your website today we had a couple of colonels, and they were talking about this idea of Congress is not the ones who are declaring war. We're just going on these executive orders to go to war. Tell us about what your thinking is on this these days.
What
and
we're
what
faced with, if this current president, were to be renewed for a presidency, I think we could probably say kiss goodbye to everything that's worthwhile, because what this fellow is headed toward is thermonuclear war. And the effort, this was started to earlier, but Obama was stopped because the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States got in the way of his continuing what he had done in Libya and going into Syria. And so for the better part of a year, in terms of lapse of time, Obama's been blocked on getting to a thermonuclear war. There are other things. Russia, of course, is on the other side. China and a lot of other countries wish to avoid that thing. And only if the United States, under its president, were to act, is the capability exist for the intention to have a thermonuclear war whose primary targets immediately would be Russia and China, among others. But if such a war were launched, it would be a world war, and it would probably take about less than an hour and a half to turn the whole planet into a nuclear winter of several years' duration, which means the virtual extermination of the human species. So right now, the people who are pushing Obama still are making a terrible mistake. Some of our Republicans aren't such prizes either, but I don't think they're headed for thermonuclear war. Obama is. And we've seen the evidence of that. He's quite impeachable on what he's done. I mean, he actually deliberately, consciously set up our leading representative at that time, set him up to be slaughtered, he and some others.
You write, and you've been talking about this whole thing in Libya in the Benghazi with Mr. Stevens. Yeah. You believe that this administration, Lyndon LaRouche, set him up?
Well, there's no question that the Obama administration itself did set him up, and the evidence on that is conclusive. He did set them up. How
do you know that?
Well, first of all, we have a lot of people in our military and security services. We also have people in foreign countries. This thing was set up by Obama. Susan Rice was an accomplice in trying to pull this thing off. But Obama himself set the thing up. And that evidence is out there, and it's really conclusive. It's a total of a lot of pieces of evidence
from different people in the military around that area.
And this is, let's say, our military intelligence capabilities. Taking the whole augmentation of security intelligence, military intelligence, and so forth, all of these things together add up to a total which say the president was not only lied, but he willfully set up the operation against Stevens.
For what purpose? What would be his motive?
Because the guy is not fit to be in government. The man should have been removed from government. The evidence was known, but some people internationally, as well as in the United States, decided to push this Obama operation, for a second term. And Obama's intention to have a second term, or his backers' second term, is actually what the war is. Because in order to have he he intends, only with the ability represented by the United States military today, could you actually launch the kind of war he's aimed at. In other words, Britain has certain capabilities and so forth, other nations have capabilities, but without the United States, they don't have the capability now to do what a thermonuclear war represents. And therefore, the important thing here is to prevent this guy from getting a continued grip. Let's hope he gets defeated, right at the post right away. But if he stays in office, a lot of people are going to be dead, and maybe all of us.
So you're saying the powers elite, the money elite, the banker, whoever, this military-industrial complex, they want Mr. Obama for a second term.
In a sense, they want to use him.
Mm-hmm.
The thing comes from a certain faction, which is the British and Saudi faction. It was, for example, British agents who were actually involved in setting up Stevens. They were the group that was in there doing it. The intention was done by other people, but it was a British authorization that did this thing. And Obama was fully witting and went along with it. Susan Rice was totally witting. She lied her head off doing all this business. So it's clear. But the point is there's some people who believe that the population of the planet ought to be reduced. They believe that we ought to cut down the food supply for our people. As a matter of fact, if we don't get a change in policy, a lot of people are going to die of starvation in the United States because we do not have the food supply to continue to sustain the present population.
What can you give us with your intelligence and from your experience of what has gone on in Libya that is not being reported in the mainstream media, Lyndon LaRouche?
Oh, the whole thing is that Obama shut the Stevens and company, shut them off from any communication and any support during the course of the week leading up to this event. He did it willfully, and the evidence is conclusive. There are a lot of people out there who've done it. We probably have about 30 or 40 different sources who are official sources of the United States or other countries who have presented the evidence, put the evidence on record in circles now. So it's only the lack of the press, the failure of the press to push ahead with the discovering the evidence. The leading press, together the intelligence-related press, all has conclusive evidence on this operation.
And this then is the obvious then to foment support for more United States military intervention into Libya and other places over there.
No, they don't want additional support. They want World War III, Thermonuclear World War III. That's what this is all about. That's what's on the circuits with all the intelligence groups, our own intelligence, military intelligence, and others, the military intelligence and related intelligence of Russia, of China, and other countries. That's what's known. The intention is, what's not set is the exact date on which the intention is to launch, get the United States. The opposition has been largely come from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who are warned against a nuclear winter of what is being done by the British and Saudis and the Obama administration. It's not an escalation of tension. The escalation is there in terms of tension, but the point is it's going for a very specific objective. And, for example, the Russians have said the same thing that our people say, that others in other parts of the world are saying, that this is the intention on the part of Obama to cause the launch of a thermonuclear war. Now, that's a war that will last for not more than an hour and a half. And after that, you will be in a nuclear winter, which means that the threat is to the very extinction of the human species if this were to happen.
Well,
and everybody who's in on this thing, who knows it, knows exactly what I know.
Really? So, but then the people, the powers that be that have the power to pull this off and to control Mr. Obama, Mr. LaRouche, they'd have to know the effects, the long-term effects of a nuclear war on any scale. So what would be the point there? I mean, why?
The point is that certain people in Britain and in Saudi Arabia, and inside the United States, the Obama administration in particular, these three entities are determined for their own reasons to go to this operation. And the point is, the option is either we surrender to them or they go to war. There's no middle ground.
So we, the American people, surrender to what they want, and what do they want?
No, they don't know what they're doing. The American people are behaving stupidly because they back off. They don't want to know something that displeases them. Right. We're not a courageous people anymore. One of the reasons we're not courageous anymore is because of what's happened to our people. Since the time that Jack Kennedy was assassinated, and his brother Robert, since that time we've been in a decline, and the courage factor in the U.S. population has been in an accelerating rate of decline ever since. Most of the people who say they would support Obama hate his guts. That is in the Democratic Party, for example. But they say they will still vote for him despite his drawbacks because the excuse is the Republicans. So it's largely a Democratic-centered operation which is defending Obama, including Bill Clinton, who's making a fool of himself in doing that. And he knows better, but he's giving in. And so that's the situation. You have the point that we have become demoralized. And this is especially since the two Bush administrations, his father and the son. They are the ones who contributed the most, especially the two in terms of the young Bush and what's now. So those three terms of presidential office have been the period which has set into motion exactly, step by step, this operation. Young Bush, for example, his administration, 2 terms, did a great deal to set things in this direction. Their intention is not to a political competition kind of thing. Their intention is to establish dictatorship. And their idea is that they're going to threaten the world with dictatorship of this type and say, we'll kill everybody if you don't submit to us. And that's the way the thing is, but they mean it. At the top level, they mean it. They are not prepared to accept defeat. And they would obviously use the United States capability. What has stopped it so far, one of the most important pieces of credit for preventing us from getting into this war already, were the Joint Chiefs of Staff, are typified that. And people like that in our services and other services are agreed on that. We are not going to submit to the bullying and blackmail of a thermonuclear threat.
So the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mr. LaRouche, that sit today, you're saying that they're the ones that are keeping this thing from really going nuts.
They're crucial. They're not the ones, but they are crucial. And the Joint Chiefs are not a political organization.
Right.
The Joint Chiefs are dedicated to the mission orientation of the U.S. military in defense of the United States.
But they serve at the pleasure of the president, correct?
Oh, I would think that language is stupid.
Okay.
I don't think our government should ever be at the pleasure of the president. The president is supposed to perform a function. It's a very important function. It's a high-ranking function. But he does not win the opportunity to dictate what the United States does. We have institutions. These institutions, when properly conducted, are the combination of government and also of other private institutions. That is, we are a government of people, and we have certain institutional frameworks, some of which are official, others are understood. And we will defend our nation and study and react to what we think the mission of our nation is. The president is selected there to be the incumbent leader of this action. But it is not his property. It's the property of the United States. He, in a sense, is a property of the United States when he's in office. So we are not a nation which, under any sensible reason, lives at the pleasure of a president. Mm-hmm. That is exactly Nixon kind of stuff, and that's the time you throw a president out of office.
Yeah. I wonder how, if the stories and what you say and others are saying about the CIA's involvement in this whole Arab whatever's going on over there in Syria, in Egypt, in Somalia, everywhere, right? Libya, and the United States and NATO's involvement in these so-called revolutions. How this goes on right under the nose, Mr. LaRouche, of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who you're saying are kind of good guys.
No, the point is, it's not good guys. This is childish.
Well, good
guys, bad guys.
I don't want to stay in that term, but I mean people that don't want the world to blow up, I guess is a better word.
Well, it's not people. It's what you're talking about. You're talking about a dictatorship. And a dictatorship has 3 control points in it. One is 2 points. The British monarchy, and that's where the real stuff comes from, and the supporting of the Saudi monarchy.
Uh-huh.
The Saudis and the British, remember the Saudis and British together set up 9/11. And this is a sequel to 9/11. The key operation in most of this terrorist stuff comes directly from certain parts of the British system and from the Saudi system. The Saudis were the one who were used by the British in a corporate arrangement using the ambassador to Saudi Arabia from the United States were used, and they set up 9/11. And that's a fact. That's not a guess. That's not an information. That's a fact. And that's why we never get the special report on the Saudi operation, which is available, but it's not available under either the Bush administrations or under the Obama administration. Mm-hmm. And those facts which exist and are known have never been presented publicly. But it was the Saudi operation, or the Saudi and a British operation combined, which ran, planned, and directed and operated 9/11.
Was Israel involved?
Israel's a different factor.
Okay.
Israel is a nation. It has all kinds of complications to it. No, but they don't do this.
So
they are not part of this.
Mr. LaRouche, other than the obvious Saudi oil, talk about this connection between the Saudi and the British and what they're doing together to pull off something like 9/11, their motive.
No, well, this is a continuation of 9/11, what we're getting right now.
What we're getting right now, but then the motive behind 9/11.
The motive is the British Empire, and the Saudi Empire is a leading subordinate influence, especially in the Islamic world, with the most important influence in running international terrorism for the British Empire now. And it's from the top down. It's not from constituencies on the lower levels, combining and conspiring. The conspiracy is right from the top, not from the midway or anything like that. It's from the top. You cannot do that. That's why the reason that the Joint Chiefs of Staff are so important is because they're patriots. They're not opportunists, and the CIA is not the source of this thing. The CIA will do what it's told to do, but it's not the source of it. This is not a CIA conspiracy. It's not another kind of conspiracy. It's a conspiracy from the top, and the top is represented as its agent is the current president of the United States. And the little foolish Bush, in the previous 2 administration, was also an accomplice. But I don't think he was too witting. Not because he couldn't be witting, but I don't think he had much wit.
So the top then would be, on the other side, someone who then controls the prime minister of
the Queen herself.
The Queen herself. Wow.
What do you think Obama is? Obama's a toady of the Queen.
He's a what, sir, of the Queen?
A toady. He runs around errands for the Queen.
And who's telling her what to do?
She is telling herself what to do. She belongs to the international organization, which actually has run the British Empire to its entire, and it still exists today. It's an empire. It's not a system in which conspiracies from the bottom or so forth run things. Yeah, there are conspiracies, yes, but the conspiracies are run from the top, not from some underling layer conspiring within against the government. And what we're getting Wall Street is essentially, collectively responsible for this thing. But that's only that aspect of it. But the actual decision making, comes from the very top, and the very top is the British Empire. And the British Empire is not the United Kingdom. The British Empire is the British monarchy. And the Saudi monarchy is an integral part of the British monarchy. It was the Saudi monarchy and the British monarchy which ran 9/11. It's the same group that's running this. It's run from the top. And you have governments of China, Russia, are well aware of this. They're on the other side. We, our patriots in our own country, are on the same side as the Russians and Chinese on this question. They're not conspiring with each other. They're realizing that they jointly have to cooperate to prevent the world from going into thermonuclear contamination. And, with this thing, just imagine, you're not talking about a war, you're not talking about a conspiracy in the ordinary sense, that kind of thing. You're talking about launching on a coordinated basis, relying largely on the U.S. submarine fleet to launch an attack on the opponents, which include Russia and China, which is intended to go off. And the minute that those submarines carry out the order to launch, and probably then two barrages or something like that, about an hour and a half it would take to run the whole operation. And the Russian operation would respond in defense. The China would respond in defense. So you would take the forces of China and Russia on the one side, and have the United States using Britain and the Saudis on the other side. Under that kind of order, you have a war, which was an extermination war, which blasts about everything on this planet. And it takes an hour and a half to do it. And after that hour and a half, you settle into what's called a nuclear winter. And under a nuclear winter, there's a question as to whether anybody will survive. And the basis of this threat is that the threat itself is intended to cause the people to submit and surrender to conquest rather than get a nuclear attack. So the intention to kill on a mass scale through nuclear war lies with the Saudis and the British. And that is the British Empire, not the British national kingdom. The kingdom has no authority in this matter.
And you're saying and you're saying that they're using this idea of a thermonuclear war as to blackmail for people then to surrender totally to what they want to do.
It's not an idea. It's a plan of operations which, on signal from the President of the United States and the Queen of England, these two figures, if they agree on this, it will happen.
All right,
it's not an influence game.
Stay right there, sir. Lyndon LaRouche, LaRouchePAC.com, 22 minutes after the hour. What do you think about this? 888-663-6386. Question or comment from Mr. LaRouche or Patrick at OneRadioNetwork.com. Good to be here tomorrow. Andrew Goss with The Real World of Money. 2 hours. It's about 22 or 23 minutes after the hour. Good morning. Lyndon LaRouche is here. Mr. LaRouche has run for president quite a number of times. LaRouchePAC.com. He's written probably over 12 books or so. Mr. LaRouche, can I ask how old you are and how have you been at this research of looking into what's going on in the world?
I've just passed my 90th birthday.
Well, good for you. My goodness. My goodness.
No, I've been at this for a long time. These things happen. You grow up in things, and coming out after World War II, and going through the process of the post-war things, I became a specialist in certain areas, including a national, consultant and rather expert at that, and became quite a notable economic forecaster over the decades. And in this process, I ended up in the 1970s in running for office as president on the basis of my knowledge of what the thermonuclear threats were. And my campaign was simply to call attention to the threat that existed of some kind of nuclear confrontation and to stop it. We assembled things internationally. I pulled together a force of leading military and related figures in France at the Gaullist types, in Germany, in Italy, and elsewhere. And this led into, with our United States, our forces, we had a combination, and we took this combination and pulled it together around the President of the United States at the time. And we were defeated, but we stuck to it, and the threat, the thermonuclear war threat, which we were dealing with then, I was one of the authors of the Strategic Defense Initiative, for example, and the President supported the Strategic Defense Initiative in two terms in his presidency. Reagan did. And so I've been at this thing, and we on this threat that the increase of the power of nuclear and thermonuclear weapons over the course of the immediate post-World War II period has been known to be, especially by the time of the beginning of the 1960s, is known to be a threat where you cannot win. You can only kill off humanity. So what we've been doing, people like us, when we've often come together on this, have been warning against this danger. We've now reached the point where the existing U.S. fleet, for example, the submarine fleet, that's one of the most impressive forces that can do this. But other nations, Russia has capabilities, China has capabilities, and other smaller nations or smaller powers have some contribution. But the essential thing is, on the one side you have Russia, China, and the other side you have the United States. Those are the real leading nuclear powers. Britain has a very significant nuclear power, but not this ratio. France has a nuclear power, but it's not that capable. It can do a lot of dirty things. But the real threat comes from the confrontation between the United States, its nuclear power on the one side, Russia and China on the others, and the rest of it's all collateral. So we've come to the point that the nuclear capabilities, or the thermonuclear capabilities, are such, not only in terms of firepower, but in terms of technology, that this could, in 1.5 hours at most, would be required to essentially cause pretty much a mass extermination of human civilization.
It's just difficult to imagine that people who are into power and control and whatever these people are, and that they could allow something like this to happen, because then at that point you say, well, what's the point? I mean, if you have as you know, some of the effects of a thermonuclear winter and the whole thing is crazy. I mean, to even think about. So you have to ask yourself, what would the point be? How they would allow it to happen?
Well, the point is very simple. You've got to think of the consequences both ways. And you have to think of the mind, as you have to do in strategic planning in general. You've got to look at the mind and the changes in the mind which you're dealing with, in order to understand what the forces are and what their intentions are and how a war comes together. Most people don't pay any attention to the subject matter which is involved in that matter. I happen to have been involved in this, not only because I was an unimportant veteran of World War II, but because of what my role has been as a forecaster and also in certain branches of scientific technology. And I became, in that process over the course of the 1970s, I became an expert in this area, on this area of applied science to military questions. And I've always operated on the basis that I understood that as the thermonuclear capabilities increased, that some idiot would get the bright idea that they could win a world war by the use of thermonuclear capabilities. Our view is, and this came partly out of the U.S. military, it came out of other sources that I was, talking with, at least back in the 1970s. I was convinced then, which is what I ran a presidential campaign on, to get the message out that we must prevent a thermonuclear war, which was intended by some people in the United States and elsewhere at that time. And I was not the only one. Most of the defenses come from the intelligence community, which is related to the military area of technology. We knew that you cannot think of running a nuclear war, and not especially a thermonuclear war. You cannot have it. And especially if it's by a major power, you can't have it. The human species' existence is then in danger. You cannot have that kind of war. All right, now we've reached the point where the United States, Russia, and China represent the greatest concentration, respectively, of this capability. We know that we cannot have such a war. We know that we cannot have a war which would lead to such a war. And therefore, we realize that things have got to change. But some people who believe in empire are not willing to go along with that. Their intention is to establish an empire. And they will attempt to use the two things you have to understand. First of all, they're not bluffing. The British and Saudis and what's behind them is not bluffing. They mean it. The question is, how will they react to the fact that they're confronted with the fact that they can't fight that war, that it means a virtual human extinction or a very large degree of human extinction, and they will go ahead anyway. And we, knowing that we have those of us who have this power, I mean, the Russians have this power, the United States certainly has it, or China has it, and in a lesser degree other countries. So we know what this war would be. And it will not be a probing war. It will not be something that's escalated. The escalation will be from the top down. It'll start from the top. And our concern is we've got to understand that we have to change the policy among nations. We have to go back to the idea of more emphasis on sovereign nation states. But we also have to change our ideas from what they've been now. So we get rid of this idea of going to thermonuclear war. For example, one of the things that came up at the same time we were going into the SDI was the concern about certain satellites that floating around up there between the area of Mars and down into toward the sun. And these satellites, which are natural satellites, can hit the Earth repeatedly. In one part of their history, we think there was probably pretty much an extermination of life on Earth before we know about mankind. But we get hit with these things occasionally, and sometimes a fairly big one. And there's always the chance, which is a probabilistic chance, that we might get hit by a very large satellite, and that would be the end of life on Earth. So there are other things. There are smaller cases, like you can get a whole city area, like the San Francisco Bay Area or New York City area, can be knocked out by one of these satellites of a relatively larger size. So the defense of Earth against satellite attacks of that type is one of our great missions. And our landing on Mars with the Curiosity operation was one of the attempts which is necessary in that direction. In other words, establishing this development on Mars of Curiosity is actually a step toward preparing to make the United States and the world capable of foreseeing and stopping or diverting satellites which might kill a great number of people on Earth or even cause human extinction. Or a comet might come in, and within about a year of fruitless struggle, we might get mankind knocked out of existence by a comet. So the defense of Earth, defense of human life on Earth, is really the objective we should be going for. Otherwise, we're not going to have much on Earth.
When you say SDI, this is your involvement with Strategic Defense Initiative in the Reagan years. You were part of that.
I was initiating it. You had, for example, about 1971, 71, something like that. We began to get involved in ideas of strategic defense, missile defense, and other warfare issues. And in that period, we had 75, 77 period. you had people in the U.S. military services, aircraft in other words, who were taking this up. I also was taking it up, and I was very much attracted to what they were doing. And so I got in on this thing, and I ran this presidential campaign, which was essentially to stop the thermonuclear threat and that sort of thing. I did this as an individual, but I soon attracted a number of highly skilled and appropriately skilled people, including people I knew who were scientists. And so, therefore, we went to work on designing a strategic defense system which would be adequate for this purpose. And that's how I got involved in this thing. And of course, I've been more and more involved. I've been involved in space, for example, since the 1980s and so forth. So this is something which I've just done, and I've played a leading role, actually, at certain points in this whole process.
Let's move a bit, Mr. LaRouche, before we let you go, to Iran. And there's supposedly nuclear capabilities with Israel beating the war drums, saying that we need to go in there. And a lot of talk, of course, after Mr. Netanyahu went to the UN. What is your analysis on what the real story is here?
Well, most of this is a bunch of foolishness. This is not an important issue. It's being used as one, but it's not. There is a certain very distant threat of Iranian nuclear capabilities and warfare capabilities. Those were curtailed and set back some years ago by Iran itself. They are working for nuclear technology, industrial technology, and related things. And if they pushed hard, they would, if they were hit, they would probably kick back by going back to doing a nuclear weapons capability as well. There is not a serious question. Now, while the Israeli government, under its present leader, is saying all kinds of silly things, the Israelis generally are very reluctant, and this is not an Israeli operation. It's an operation which has been imposed upon, and backed by certain forces in Britain and the United States and Saudi Arabia. They want this as a way of getting this war started, this thermonuclear war started. Mm-hmm. As a proposition, the idea that Israel is going to do this is a very bad joke. The idea that Iran is going to start such a war is a very bad joke. These are simply the kinds of things that are used as leverage to fool people into going into this thermonuclear war. The problem right now for the British and for Obama is that so far they're stymied. Russia, China, and the United States, and particularly so far, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, our military, will not allow this war to be started. So now you have the British and the Saudis who want the war, who want to organize it, are doing various kinds of things, including playing on the Israeli chief of state now, Israeli government now, to try to get them to do it. The Israelis do not want to be involved in a war with Iran.
The Israeli people.
Well, not only the Israeli people, but pretty much the top-ranking Israeli leaders that I know about. With this idea of going to this operation with Netanyahu is only a stooge for the United States and Britain. They don't want it.
They meaning
the Israelis don't want this damn thing.
Sure. Right.
They don't want it. But Obama, particularly, has pushed it on Netanyahu. And Netanyahu is capitulating to Obama. The Israelis do not want that operation. Why should they? It'd be the extermination of Israel. And they don't want that. I mean, you're going to start a thermonuclear war, and you're going to involve Israel in it? What's going to happen then?
So this is tantamount to a Cuban Missile Crisis kind of thing to foment more people being controlled because out of fear?
No, just fear. When you go into making threats involving thermonuclear systems, you are not using blackmail. Not in the ordinary sense. In other words, you're not saying, we will bomb you if you don't agree. That game does not work with thermonuclear weapons. It's not possible.
Because?
You're either going to do it or not. If you're going to use it as a threat, and the only threat there is, submit to the British monarchy for her plan to reduce the world's population from 7 billion people to about less than 1. Or we bomb.
So this is, you saying this whole genocide thing is driving the whole game?
Absolutely. Look at the green policy. What do you think the green policy is?
Green policy, meaning what, sir?
Meaning no low technology, cutting out all high technology.
Oh, you mean with the carbon tax and all that stuff?
All that stuff is nonsense. It's a swindle. It's a lie.
Sure.
What we need, for example, we have a project which I've been pushing again, which was not my original project, but I adopted it, and we're supporting it. NWAPA. NWAPA was the North American Water and Power Alliance. That program, which was already going into effect, was stopped by what happened with the war in Indochina. It went off the table. But the capability still exists. Now we have a situation in which the central states of the United States, which are now out of food, Texas and the whole area north, is generally without the ability to feed people. We do not have presently in the United States the food supply guarantee needed to maintain the population of the present population of the United States this year. As we get towards Christmas time, we're going to have nothing in your stocking because we have lost our supply. We ruined the whole area, the central area of the United States. The subsiding of the territory and the effect on the water systems, the way that we did this thing, is such that we are running in a crucial food supply. The recent 2 or 3 years have seen a crisis in food supply. By Christmas time, Santa Claus will have nothing for most of you because there isn't enough food to go around. It's not being produced. And what the food interests, like Monsanto and company, are doing is practically guaranteeing the death of it. Now, what does NWAPA do? It was NWAPA, which is a feasible project for about 20 years to redefine the entire water system of the United States. This system would mean a great recovery of the economy of the United States. It would raise the water level, the water table level in the Central Plains. It would also increase the supply of water distributed across the United States because the effects of such a system would do that. It involves Canada, it involves the United States, it involves northern Mexico. With this kind of project, we can solve the problem, but we're going directly in the opposite direction. We're going with a green policy, which means we are having a degeneration of our ability to grow food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's obvious. It really is happening, Mr. LaRouche. I don't think you're being at all over the top on this with this food thing. Boy, if you look at it like I know you have, and I have a little bit, it's very, very spooky what's going on in the world of food.
It's frightening, and the problem is our politicians, our political systems have capitulated, not because they're supporting it, that their intent may not be to support it, but they have to go along to get along, as the Congress says. And when people submit to get along to go along and forego those measures which are needed for humanity because some political interest doesn't want that to happen, particularly the green interest. The green interest is the greatest threat to humanity apart from thermonuclear weapons that exist today. But people believe this nonsense. And we need to improve the technology that we use. With the improved technology, which includes nuclear resource techniques, we can increase the water supply available to the people of the United States. And we can solve a lot of problems. But we're not solving problems when we're increasing the number of problems. And what we need is a refreshment somehow of sanity in the world's population, because since Jack Kennedy was assassinated, the United States has been going down step by step all the way. There has never been a period of net improvement in the economy of the United States per capita per square kilometer in the entire period since Jack Kennedy was assassinated.
You've mentioned that several times. Do you think the very fact that probably 90% of the people in the world, or in the country and the world, probably know that the official story of Mr. Kennedy's murder is not what they say, that's part of the issue as well?
Well, it's part of the issue. It should be part of the issue, because when a president of the United States is assassinated by what included foreign interests coming up through Mexico to cross the border into Texas, kill the president, and then be across the border back to Texas, back to Mexico, before anybody realizes what's really happened, a thing like that. Well, when we let that happen, and this was this agreement, in California, the agreement. We know who did it. It's over. Don't talk about it anymore. Go ahead with World War, whatever it is, the Indochina War, which was crazy. It was absolutely insane. It was the Indochina War, which was used by various British and U.S. interests to cause the United States to go into a dive. What had happened is that under Jack Kennedy, who had adopted the program of Franklin Roosevelt, the policy program of Franklin Roosevelt, we were going to a great recovery. It was a recovery process. It wasn't one of these things where everything is wonderful overnight, but the rate of increase of productivity, the improvements in technology, the launching of the space program, all these programs, they actually got reversed. The reason was, we had to fight the war in Indochina. So we went into a process where we ruined the ability to meet our economic development. There was no need to go into that war. General Douglas MacArthur was one of the chief advocates of this for Jack Kennedy. And you would find that the other leaders in World War II, the top leaders, would all have agreed on the same thing. Don't do it. Don't get involved in a land war in Asia. That was the rule. We already knew what the problem was in Asia. I was in Asia. I was in military service in Asia, northern Burma for a while. Don't get involved in that. Unless you have a real issue, don't do it. We got into it. We got into the first period of the Indochina War. You had normal troops. Then you had this mass draft test of people. And you had a bunch of dope addicts coming out of it, not human beings, essentially. We had probably still more people eligible for long convictions for drug addiction, which came out entirely out of that business. So we are killing people in American soldiers are being destroyed in Asia, in South Asia, in these wars we're fighting Pakistan and elsewhere in Asia. We're getting our troops killed in wars that are not fit to fight and not needed to fight, in order to promote a drug operation in Southeast Asia.
Yes, sir. How is it? It may be a dumb question, but the amount of control that these people have on Congress, it's just, to me, I can't even get my head around it, Mr. LaRouche, of how this goes on.
I understand it, unfortunately.
Do you?
It's what it is. It's not just the Congress. The Congress has been intimidated since the killing of Jack Kennedy. Lyndon Johnson was clear on this. Why did he go to war? He thought they were going to kill him next.
Really?
Yeah, he said so. Talking about 3 rifles aimed at his neck.
So that's what JFK's murder was about. Was more about his getting soft on Vietnam than anything. No. There was no reason to go into such. No, that's what I mean. But wasn't Kennedy wanting to get out of what?
No. Kennedy had forbidden, as president, had blocked any attempt to put U.S. troops into Indochina.
But in '63, there was some troops in there, wasn't there? There advisors.
No, there was a CIA type of operation, which was working with the South in Vietnam, and that was the so-called defense of the South Vietnam area. and it was not going to a U.S. commitment to an on-the-ground war in Asia, in South Asia. And what that specifically was the issue was that when Jack Kennedy, with the advice of Douglas MacArthur, said no land war in Asia.
Just don't go. Yeah.
Huh?
Just don't go there. Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. And so, what the initial reason for the killing of Jack Kennedy was he was absolutely blocking the attempt to get a full ground war of U.S. forces in Indochina. That was the primary issue. But the other issue was he was also causing a industrial technological revolution typified by the space program, which he did. And these programs also displeased very much the same powers that wanted to get us into this long land war in Indochina.
Well, they got us in there.
And what happened is the guts of our people went down. Remember, I came out of World War II. I was late relief from there. I was up in Indochina, and we knew what this was all about. We came back out of it, and we knew what Asia was like. We were on the ground. I was on the ground in north part of that thing, up in the jungle, and we knew what it was. Don't get in the war. I was involved also in the question of I was in India for a while after the end of my service, and I saw what the situation was in India. I was in the middle of what's called the Calcutta riots, which were 3 years of hell, 3 days of hell, rather. And no, don't do that. And there's no need to do it. Warfare is not always the solution to these problems. Sometimes other methods are better, and today they are much better.
And they had that much control over Lyndon Johnson to make that happen.
Oh, they terrified him. He was just plain terrified. No, you have to think of it. He's vice president. Now he's president. He knows his president was assassinated by people within the circles of U.S. government. He is a weaker person in terms of his personal influence than Jack. If Jack can be killed with impunity and some stooge is stuck in there to take the blame, what do you think that Johnson thinks about his numbers? When Johnson knows what the issue was getting this war in Southeast Asia going. He said, if they'll do that to him, what am I going to do? And he was given a lot of signals that they were not going to put up with Jack's policy under him. So he gave in. Not that he liked it, he was against it. He hated it. He thought they were coming to get him next, the way they got Jack.
Wow. And
so the guts went out of our people by this kind of operation.
And no wonder he didn't run again in, 68?
Well, he was not in best health either.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was the case, yes.
Where were you back then in the during the Johnson era? What were you doing?
Well, I was not in a warfare area at that point. I was long since out of that. I was a consultant at that point in economics. But that's
how did you understand? Did you understand what Mr. LaRouche, what was going on back then? How would you be in the know back then, or was this something that you gained this information later on?
Well, I was fairly well informed person, and had some experience and learned a lot fast under the conditions of World War II and the immediate post-war period. I recognized what was happening to us, and I became fairly, top-ranking skills in terms of economic forecasting. And so in those ranks, if you're top in that ranks, you get access for one way or another to a lot of opportunities to do things.
So then with that as a background, can I assume then there's not much surprise in your mind with what's going on today in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya and the whole rest of it? Yeah.
I've been fighting it. For example, I was involved with people of British influence in Britain with whom I agreed on not going into a second war in West Asia, and of course, my opposition, the British opposition, who was the prime minister, pulled used a fake pretext for going into a second war in Iraq.
Oh, with the whole...
No need for it. It was a fraud.
Yeah, the whole yellow cake, world's weapons of mass destruction, all that stuff.
That's right. That was it. So that I actually was working with the CBS, British Service, Information Service, on discussing these matters, and it was very clear that there was no reason for a second war in Iraq. That the whole thing was a fake, but they got the thing through, the fake. We just recently the atrocity of that long war. Then the long second war in Iraq and used to spread the war throughout other places, and then somebody came in with a bright idea of putting drugs in there, poppy seed operation into Asia. Spread the war considerably, including Pakistan. The whole problem we're looking at...
Your phone is cutting out on us for some reason. Yeah.
Is a product of that. And it was done by London. The decided to go along with it.
Well, I'm sorry. Your phone is cutting out terribly now. I don't know, we had a great connection there, and we somehow just kind of lost you.
Well, these happen.
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up. It's time to wrap up anyway. Mr. LaRouche, thank you after all these years for all of your research and your time and your passion. And I think you have something coming up. Is it this Friday that folks can listen to?
Yeah, it is. It's this Friday. We're having a special event, which is it'd be a national broadcast.
And you can learn more about it at LaRouchePAC.com, right?
Absolutely.
And you're doing a special broadcast. Is it Friday night?
Yeah, and at 8 o'clock.
And 8 p.m. Eastern?
Yeah.
And then folks can listen to that on that website if they care to.
Yeah.
Mr. LaRouche, thanks for your time.
Well, thank you.
We appreciate it. It's been an honor, sir.
Have fun.
Yeah. You get all sites here on OneRadioNetwork.com. Can't say much after that, can you? Who knows? Okay. Onward and upward, folks. We're going to do whatever we can to help you to stay informed, give you some ideas, and see how you might want to proceed forward in the next few years, and what avenues you might have to do that. And we'll talk about money tomorrow with Andrew Goss and the real world of money. Some of the people we have coming up here. We're going to do a whole show on sleep with Dr. Dave. That'd be pretty fun. That's coming up. Also, John Hogue on the whole Iran, Nostradamus, Trip-to-dee-doo-dah. That's coming up. Thanks to Sharon for her great work on the website, getting the gas, producing the show, taking care of us, keeping Patrick on a short leash. And thank you for your ongoing support of our sponsors. When you need a product or service that we promote, consider going through us, and that helps us to do the financial thing here. And also for your support in dollars on PayPal. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock with Andrew Goss and the real world of money.
Broadcasting from the beautiful Hill Country in Texas, this is OneRadioNetwork.com.